Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Beyond the Cage. I'm your host, Jim Gramm. Before we get to this week's live episode, which will see us recap UFC Orlando and pick the main card for UFC 195, two fighters from UFC 195 will be stopping by to chat with me about their fights. First up is Joe Duffy. We will also have Stipe Miocic, who would join us right after. And looking at Joe Duffy, the Irishman will be taking on Dustin Poirier on the Fight Pass portion of the undercard. So let's get right to it here. I got Joe on the line. And Joe, thanks for joining me here on Beyond the Cage.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jim.
Now, Joe, of course, as most fans know, you had to pull out of your last fight in Dublin due to an injury just days before the fight. And I was wondering, how long did that injury actually keep you out of training?
I think it was maybe like I was back in London for a little bit. I was moving out of my apartment in London, and then I was pretty much back training, 10 days after, but no contact. There was no contact for 30 days, so I had another couple of weeks before I could do any kind of, hard training or whatever. But, that was it. I got back in the gym and just done some technical stuff and kept my mind fresh, keep it ticking over.
Looking back at your career in combat sports, Joe, have you ever had to pull out a fight so soon to the actual date of the bout before?
No, never. I've never. That's the only fight other than one fight before the Ultimate Fighter that I've ever pulled out of. So, that was a bit annoying for me. Obviously having a good record in that terms, but, these things happen, and unfortunately, it just happened when I was a main event in my home country. So, it was a bit of a sickener.
After you were unable to go for the main event there of UFC Dublin just a few weeks ago, they ended up promoting Luis Smolka against Paddy Holohan in the main event. And I was wondering, what did you think about that fight that became the main event there in Dublin?
It was an interesting battle. Both guys were back and forth. Lots of ground game going on. So, for me as a fighter, I'm more of a technician, and I enjoyed watching that fight. I know a lot of fans were, making a bit of noise about it on Fight Pass, but unfortunately, in the fight games, that's the way it goes. But Paddy came out, and the crowd were loving it. So it made for a good fight.
Now, of course, that fight you had to pull out of was in your home country of Ireland, and I was wondering, are you still hopeful that eventually you'll be able to fight for the UFC in Ireland?
Yeah, I would love that. Especially after the way it all went down. I always want to fight in front of the Irish public, and the support I even got on fight week. I was going around chatting to the fans, a lot of the fans in the hotel and so on, and I was really grateful for their support. So it'd be nice to go over there and put on a show for them.
Now, your fight at UFC 195 will be in Las Vegas, and at least under the UFC banner, you haven't fought there before. So I was wondering, are you excited to be in the fight capital of the world for this fight?
Without a doubt. I think as a kid, everyone who's in this sport thinks about competing in Vegas. That's where all the big fights take place, and especially MGM. So, that's going to be a big one for me, and I feel it's something I need to get used to. And I feel like a lot of my fights are going to be taking place here in Vegas. So, it's definitely a good thing to get used to.
As you mentioned earlier, Joe, that injury that cost you the fight in Dublin, it didn't keep you out of training too long. So looking how everything went down, were you pretty glad that you were still able to fight Dustin here at UFC 195?
Definitely. I think it's a fight we both wanted. And, I spoke to Dustin in Dublin, and he said, we'll get it back on. So, January 2nd was the date, and, it worked out well. We're both firing on all cylinders and ready to go.
Now, originally your fight against Dustin was supposed to be on the pay-per-view main card. They have now moved it to the highlighted fight for the Fight Pass card. And I was wondering, does that matter to you at all, whether you're on the main card or the Fight Pass portion of the card, Joe?
A lot of people has made a big thing about this, but do you think the amount of numbers that the Fight Pass is is doing. I think it's a great move. We get the fight on Fight Pass. All the public from Europe get to watch it at an earlier time, which makes more sense. And I think in the next year is gonna be the way forward. There's gonna be a lot of big fights on Fight Pass. So I think this is a new start to 2016, and UFC are setting the precedent with this fight.
Looking at your opponent, Dustin Poirier, what does he bring to the table that you're going to have to look out for come January 2nd?
Obviously, from Dustin's previous fights, he's dangerous. He's a finisher, whether it be on the feet or on the ground. So, I've always got to be alert. I've got to be switched on, and I can't make too many mistakes. But I'm confident. I feel good, and I know come fight week that everything's going to be perfect, and I'm going to be raring to go.
Do you feel as though that if the fight goes to the ground that you'll have an advantage over Dustin, especially looking at your submission game, Joe?
Again, I never really planned for this kind of stuff. I'm very comfortable in my overall game, so I never look too much into what he does or where I'll have the advantage. I just feel the fight starts standing, so we take care of that and then let the fight unfold. And I believe I got the tools to do the job wherever.
All right, Joe, I'll get you out of here with this. Of course, the main event of UFC 195 is Carlos Condit against Robbie Lawler. How do you think that one's going to play out?
Yeah, it's a great fight. It's a great fight. It's one I'm really looking forward to watching myself. I think Carlos is gonna take it. For some reason, Robbie's a pressure fighter, and I think Greg Jackson and his team will come up with a pretty nifty game plan, and I think Carlos will catch him.
Once again, he is Joe Duffy. You can follow him on Twitter at Duffy_MMA. And Joe, thanks for coming on the show. I really appreciate it, and look forward to your fight against Dustin on January 2nd.
Thanks very much. Take care.
Once again, that was Joe Duffy right here on Beyond the Cage, up ahead of his fight at UFC 195 against the Diamond Dustin Poirier. Now that he has departed, now waiting on the line to join me here, he is also fighting at UFC 195. He will be taking on Andrei Arlovski. He is the heavyweight Stipe Miocic. You can follow him on Twitter at his name, Stipe Miocic. And Stipe, thanks for joining me here on Beyond the Cage.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Now, Stipe, you were supposed to fight on the Dublin card back in October. You had to pull out of that fight due to injury, originally scheduled against Ben Rothwell. And I was wondering, how long did that injury keep you out of training?
It took me a couple of weeks, after I announced that I wasn't going to fight, which was terrible. I've never pulled out a fight before. So, probably 3-4 weeks, I do a lot of rehab and stuff like that. But, now I'm good, 100%.
My next question will be two parts here, Stipe. First, was it disappointing to you to have to pull out of that fight in Dublin? And the second part is, even though you have this fight booked against Arlovski and you were supposed to take on Rothwell, are you still thinking that you might want to take Rothwell on sometime in the near future?
Yeah, man, listen, I'll fight anyone, It sucks. I don't like pulling out a fight. It was a good fight for me. It was a great matchup. He's a great competitor. I think it would have been a hell of a fight between both of us. But, unfortunately, I couldn't take the fight. I couldn't do it.
Now, as I mentioned, you got hurt. You were supposed to fight Ben Rothwell. That fight was off. As you mentioned, you weren't out very long. So I was wondering, how did it all materialize, the fight against Arlovski? Was that something you were trying for, or did you get a call from Joe Silva or something like that?
Oh, no, I called him and I said, hey, I think it'd be good to go January 2nd. I was already in shape for my last camp. And I said, hey, I went a couple weeks of rehab, but I should be good for January 2nd. Is there any, can we, do the matchup back with Ben Rothwell? And they said, no, you got to fight Arlovski. I said, okay. So that's pretty much how it went. I did ask for the fight, but, they said, they gave me Andre instead.
Looking at your opponent, Andrei Arlovski, despite being 36 years old, he's had a career resurgence as of late. And I was wondering, despite him being a longtime veteran of the sport, do you still got to be wary of his knockout power?
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, he's a former champ, man. The guy's, he's fought the best in the world. He's a veteran of the sport. We just still have to, be careful what he does, and but come January 2nd, I'm gonna have a good game plan going in, and I'm gonna be confident going into that fight, but you gotta watch out for it doesn't matter who it is, and it's a heavyweight division, so you want 4 ounce gloves, anything can happen.
Now, maybe next to your fight against Junior Dos Santos, do you think Orlovsky will be the best boxer you will ever face in the UFC?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think, it's hard to say because some guys had different aspects of the game. Mark Hunt, and you got good boxer with a lot of power. Something you have to watch out for. Yeah, definitely. Besides JDS, he's probably one of the top guys with good boxing too.
Now, your last 2 fights both went into the 5th round, and with this fight against Orlovsky just being a 3-rounder, do you feel that your conditioning will be on point for it?
I hope so. I've been pushing it and having a great camp, and my coach has put me through the ringer. So he's gonna come in condition too. So we're just gonna see who wants him more.
Now, your last fight against Mark Hunt was in his home country of Australia, and I was wondering, have you ever fought against someone in their backyard like that before?
I fought a lot of guys in their hometown. I fought Fabio Maldonado, in Brazil. I fought Stefan Struve in the UK. So it is what it is. I'm used to it. No big deal.
Now, your fight at UFC 195 will be in Las Vegas, where you haven't fought for the UFC since 2012. So, will it be nice to be back in the fight capital of the world?
Oh yeah, I'm excited. I love the fight in Vegas, especially because it's in the streets. In the States. So, I'm super excited. I'm going to travel overseas.
As most know, you are a native of the Cleveland area there in Ohio, and despite the UFC coming to Ohio several times over the last few years, they have yet to make a stop in Cleveland. And as a Cleveland native, are you hopeful that the UFC makes a stop in Cleveland in 2016?
Yeah, it'd be awesome. There's a lot of fans here, a lot of big MMA fans and UFC fans, and a big hunger to be it's gonna get sold out real quick. So hopefully they do. It'd be great. Hopefully I'm in the card. I'll have to travel far. So, but yeah, in general, I just think it'd be a great place for a UFC event because there's so many big fans here.
Now, Stipe, I wanted to get your thoughts on this. Of course, a guy you know pretty well. You've trained with him before in Mirko Krokop. He had some issues with the USADA stemming from his originally scheduled fight on November 28th for the UFC in South Korea. And I was wondering, what are your thoughts on this situation here with Mirko Krokop?
I don't know. I didn't really talk to him about it, but I talked to him a little bit about it, but I think there's more to the story than what everyone else is saying. You can't really believe what media says and stuff like that. And, there's only 2 sides of the story, and he told me his side. I believe him.
With all this news, he has said that he will be retiring, that being Mirko Krokop, and I was wondering, do you really think that this will be the last we'll see of Mirko Krokop, that he won't fight again, Stipe?
I don't know. We'll see. I love watching him fight, but he's got to take care of himself, and that's the main thing. It's all about him. It's all matters. It's all about you. And that's what I told him.
Now, a little over a week ago, there was a big fight in your division, the heavyweight division, as Junior Dos Santos took on Alistair Overeem, with Overeem coming out victorious. And I was wondering, what did you think about that fight?
That was it was a interesting fight because they were very tentative because I think they both knew they had power, so one of them didn't want to mess up, and Overeem definitely got a good hook and put Junior down and won the fight. So I don't know how it looks. It's what the UFC wants, so it doesn't really matter. It could be one thing, but you can think one thing, but it could be totally something different.
Sticking with your division, the heavyweight division, of course, Cain Velasquez will rematch Fabricio Verdum coming up in February. And I was wondering, how do you think that rematch is going to play out?
Oh, I don't know. It's gonna be a hell of a fight. You got Verdum who was a champ, and then you have Velasquez who's been a champ for a while, he's fighting again real soon, so it's not like he's taking time off. So we'll see. I think they're both gonna have different game plans. They'll both be in better condition. I think Cain has a different game plan. So Verdum. So it's just I think it just what implements the best is gonna win. But it's just it's hard to say. You never know what's gonna happen. That's the best thing about MMA.
Now, looking at your last fight against Mark Hunt, you used a lot of your wrestling skills to lead you to victory in that fight, and I was wondering, should we expect a similar type approach for you this time against Orlowski?
Whatever happens, happens. I'm just gonna see what's the best, what's open. I'm not gonna push anything if I have to. I'm just gonna see how my striking works, and if takedowns, I'm definitely gonna take it. If not, I'll just keep staying on my feet and I'll beat him to the punch.
Okay, Stipe, I'll get you out of here with this main event of UFC 195, Carlos Condon against Robbie Lawler for the welterweight title. How do you think that one's going to play out?
I don't know, man. That's gonna be amazing. Those two guys are warriors. It's gonna be an amazing fight. Oh my God, I can't even talk. I'm so pumped right now about that fight. Two good dudes, and they're good fighters, and it's gonna be an amazing fight. I'm actually super excited. At least I can watch it.
Once again, he is Stipe Miocic. You can follow him on Twitter at just his name, Stipe Miocic. And Stipe, thanks for coming on the show. I really appreciate it and look forward to your fight against Orlowski come January 2nd.
Hey, thanks a lot. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate that.
You just heard my interview with Stipe Miocic, and just before that, I talked to Joe Duffy. Both will be fighting on the UFC 195 card on pay-per-view from Las Vegas, January 2nd, 2016, with Duffy's fight coming against Dustin Poirier on the Fight Pass portion of the undercard. And of course, Stipe will be on the main card for the pay-per-view against Andrei Arlovski. Up next is a live Beyond the Cage where we will recap UFC Orlando and we will pick the main card for UFC 195. Stay tuned. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Beyond the Cage. I'm your host, Jim Gramm. Alongside me is Billy Brandt and Colin Camper. As you just heard, my interviews with Joe Duffy and Stipe Miocic for UFC 195, where, of course, on this episode, we will pick the main card for UFC 195, and we will also recap the main card fights for UFC Orlando a couple weeks ago in Orlando, Florida, UFC on Fox 17, it's also known as. Guys, before we get to the UFC Orlando card, of course, as I just said, we had Joe Duffy and Stipe Miocic. Your guys' thoughts on Joe and Stipe and what they had to say leading into the fights this weekend?
These are two fights I was really excited for, and I'm excited to hear from them. And I know as far as Duffy not caring with being on Fight Pass and everything, but that fight deserves to be so much higher, and it's going to be an exciting fight. Stipe, he brought some good points with being a couple 5-rounders. Now he's coming back to a 3, but that fight's exciting. Arlovski's been dangerous. He's been on tear, so I can't wait to see both of these.
Yeah, no, I like Duffy. I like his attitude going in and everything. We'll see how Poirier does. I'm excited for that fight. As a Fight Pass, it's kind of like a little treat for exclusive members almost. I mean, that's a decent card. That'll get people to tune in early. And then Arlovski Stipe, that's going to be really fun. I like Stipe's confidence, but I mean, how many 3-round fights do you see Arlovski in? So,
well, his last one was a 3-rounder, and he did.
I'm forgetting that. Okay, I'm taking that out of my memory right now.
Yeah, because it wasn't that great of a fight. Yeah, we're all trying to tune out his fight against Frazier. The fight that was years in the making did not quite deliver.
Yeah. I really forgot about that fight completely.
Well,
just now.
Yeah, well, most people were trying. I think he's trying to forget it too.
I was so excited for that coming from the Travis Brown fight, and then wow.
So that's what I mean. If you look at based on. So, all right. Real quick before we get to Orlando, I think we kind of have to mention this. Anderson Silva, first of all, back in the UFC, already has a fight booked, and it's now the main event of UFC London against Michael Bisping. Bisping's original opponent, Gegard Mousasi, now in the co-main event against Talis Leites for basically 2 huge fights in the middleweight division. If Bisping, I think regardless of how old and how long Silva's been out of action, can beat Anderson Silva, you can't tell me that he's not a legit title contender after all these years he's been fighting in this division. And Mousasi and Leites obviously both are coming off losses. They're both still top 10. A win really puts them right back into the swing of things. And that's a big card. And guess what? It's on the UFC Fight Pass. So if you want to see Anderson Silva fight again, you're going to have to get UFC Fight Pass or know someone that has UFC Fight Pass.
I feel like people have been talking about this Silva Bisping fight happening forever now. And I'm glad to see it finally happen. Maybe not the best time. They're going a little Bellator route with this one, getting it in later. But I don't even know what to think about this fight. It's a lot of questions. Bisping, he's not losing in London, but Silva's still Silva. A lot of people forget and they count him out, but he did only lose to Weidman, who was a beast, and he took out a lot of people. So we'll see where this one goes.
Yeah, no, it's gonna be interesting. I think Taos Laitez Musashi, first of all, that's gonna be cool. Who was Laitez's last loss though? Wasn't that Hall?
It was actually Bisping in
Oh,
Scotland,
yeah.
which
That's
I think
right.
Billy and I both thought Laitez won, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
We
okay,
go
yeah, I
back to
remember that now.
episode,
Yeah.
But that was a
Yeah.
great fight, regardless.
That was a really good fight. Bisping and Silva, I mean, people have been waiting for this one for a while now. Especially Bisping. He's never lost in London. He always comes to perform. He's got that insane cardio. So he's always there to put on a pace. He's not going to tire out and start to eat unnecessary shots. He's always moving his feet back and forth, in and out. I think Bisping's improved tremendously. Just every year he fights, he just looks crisper and crisper. He's really, I don't want to say like he's trying to make a claim for this title shot because we always know he is. But I think he just loves the game so much. I mean, he's always just improving. Unfortunately, with that eye injury, we'll see, how that goes. It's been kind of skeptical for a lot of us, but
Still, I don't think Bisping will ever get a title shot, especially now with Rockhold.
oh yeah, well,
Even if he does win this fight,
I don't think there's gonna be a title shot because I mean, you got dudes like Romero, you got dudes like Weidman, you got honestly, even if Bisping wins, you could almost argue just Silva getting closer to a title shot than Bisping, just because of the way things work in the UFC, which sucks for Bisping because I love him. He's a great dude. But I could still see him piecing up and smacking the crap out of Silva more than people expected. I mean, even Diaz was tagging on Silva for a bit. So if Diaz wasn't just playing around so much, as those two going back and forth, I mean, Bisping's going to get in your face and just lay it on you. So I don't know. We'll see.
Let's get to UFC Orlando, December 19th. So almost 2 weeks ago, we had the week break there for Christmas. Before we get to the 4-fight main card, big things happened on the undercard. Got to give a big shout out. Vicente Luque got revenge on Hader Hassan. I guess when it really mattered to the non-Ultimate Fighter fight is he not only won, but got performance of the night for his first round submission win over Hassan by Anaconda choke. And Luque, when that fight happened, even though he lost, I looked at that kid and thought, man, for a guy that was 7-4, he looks really good. And I thought that he was the best guy the Black Zillions had to feature, regardless of Kamaru Usman. I'm just talking about total skills. Usman was good, but a little more one-dimensional. I thought Luque has a bright future, and I think he showed it there by submitting Hassan there in the first round. And Hassan, of course, made it all the way to the final in that season of The Ultimate Fighter just a few months ago.
Yeah, definitely. It says a lot more to just the fact that he has experience. I mean, a 7-4 guy, I mean, it's easy to look at him and be like, okay, well, he's got an right average record. But sometimes there's dudes out there who have records like that, 7-4, 8-5, things like that, where those losses, they're just experience and they're notches under the belt. And those guys, they come back like fire after a loss. So
yeah, this is huge. I mean, when you take a loss to someone in any way and then come back and change it, it's hard to do. And to come in first round, get a good choke, I mean, this is big. I'm changing the subject here, but was that Black Zillions rumor true or not?
No, that was false.
It's just
false?
Yeah.
So we're going to see a lot of improvement from them. This might be like a new star coming out of that gym that they need.
I think the reason I knew it was false is they had 3 guys fight on this card, and the third gym was about to close. Those 3 guys wouldn't have continued to train there.
Yeah.
You don't have 3 guys from one camp fight on the card and then go, oh, the next day it's closing down. How does that?
Yeah, it made no sense. I've seen some say it was fake, some say it, and I was just like, I don't know.
Also, as I mentioned, Kamaru Usman, the grappler beat the striker Leon Edwards. This decision I think a lot of people thought that was going. Nick Lentz is in his return to the lightweight division. Just gets by Danny Castillo. That's just the way Castillo fights. He always seems to be losing by a split decision. And then big return for the Barn Cat, Tamden McCrory to the UFC. Not only does he beat Josh Hammond, he submits him in the 3rd round with a triangle choke. And that's pretty awesome. I mean, like I said, Tamden McCrory was a guy that was in the UFC, had a little success, left, kind of was unheard of. Then all of a sudden he won like 2 fights in Bellator and then was back in the UFC and now has a victory over Josh Salmon, who we know is a very dangerous knockout artist, and he was able to submit him. So big ups to the Barn Cat.
yeah, definitely. I mean, he's going to Robbie Lawler path now. He's going right for that middleweight title. I'm telling you, that's how Lawler did it. I don't know. I like Barn Cat. Yeah, I was happy to see him win. I like Salmon, but it happens.
Yeah, to come back against someone like Salmon and get a big win, trying to choke, you get the finish, it's huge to come back on that. We'll see big fights from him real soon.
And then Sarah Kaufman loses a split decision to Valentina Shevchenko. Is this the end for Sarah Kaufman? I mean, she was at one time, the Strikeforce Women's Champion, the number one 135-pound female fighter in the world. And since that point, she's been pretty mediocre, only being 3-3 with a no contest, which was originally a loss against Jessica Ai. So like 3-4, losing her last two. Davis is obviously still a top fighter, so that one is not too bad, but the loss here to a relatively unknown, and Shevchenko is not, that good. Maybe she did have, of course, that accident that kept her out of action for about a year. Maybe that's doing more than we thought, and she's definitely not the same fighter, that was, close to, that was the champion, back in 2010.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the only way is this is the end for her. So if she calls it quits, that division's still kind of shallow to start just cutting fighters for losses. Because then if you do it for her, you set precedent that you have to start cutting other female fighters in that division as well. Just off of records. It's just like, I don't think they would. They still need some names. Kaufman still has a name to her. But then Valentina Shevchenko is not a joke. I mean, to have that last minute change thrown at you like that, Shevchenko's a killer. And she came out and showed it. And it's just like, Kaufman still has decent, I guess to say decent losses. It's like she's still fighting top tier talent.
I didn't think the UFC was going to cut her. I'm just saying, like, she might have to start looking at, the next phase of her career, because I don't know.
Cut to 125. Wait for that 125 division to come.
Maybe I don't know how much weight she cuts, but yeah, she's going to have to make some changes because it hasn't looked good in her last.
Go up or down.
Yeah, it's getting tough for her, but like he kind of said, in this women's division, you can kind of turn it around and get back to it real quick. You string a couple of wins together, so I wouldn't say it's the end yet, but it's definitely looking towards it. She needs to string together a win, but that fight is no joke. I mean, to take that on short notice, I'm gonna give her a little. I know she's an unknown, but I'm pretty sure she was like pretty known in the Muay Thai.
Yeah, was it like what 9 championships, 17, something like that? Shit, like crazy amount of them.
Monster in her own right. I mean, it was a tough fight to take last minute, so maybe I'd say if she takes one more loss, though, I mean, there's nowhere else you can really go from there.
Nate Marquardt knocked out CB Dalloway. That's I don't know the odds, but that could be the biggest upset of the card, I would imagine, because especially considering Marquardt's last fight there against Gastelum. And then Charles Oliveira returns to action. I think it's not surprising that he beats Miles Jury, but the fact he submits him in the first round, with Jury, should be a pretty solid frame dropping down from 155. I think that's awfully impressive. And Jury does have some good ground and what he's known. Oliveira goes out and submits him, and to me, puts him right back in line after that injury he had against Max Holloway earlier this year.
I like that. It's tough on Miles Jury. He's had some success at lightweight and everything, and then he took that Cerrone loss. But I don't know. I just feel like Miles Jury has like kind of almost like a chip on his shoulder from that season, The Ultimate Fighter he was on, and I feel like he feels
from
like
the second from both seasons, The Ultimate Fighter. He was
that's right. That's true.
He's one of the few guys.
And it's like I'm not saying he feels entitled to more success in UFC, but I feel like he's fighting experienced dudes now and everything, and I feel like it's starting to show that his experience level, even though he's on those 2 seasons and he's been fighting for the UFC a while, probably isn't on the same level as dudes like Oliveira and Cerrone and stuff. And it's a tough loss for Jury. I mean, I like him at featherweight because he's going to use that size advantage, and there's some good fights for him down there. But more along the lines of like dudes like Nick Lentz and further down. Oliveira is still a killer. Just because he took that injury in his last fight doesn't mean he's on that losing record. So that's just a comeback fight for a great fighter.
Let's talk about Nate Marquardt real quick. First off, Steve Dalloway, I think he crashed him kind of early. Why did he walk right at him? Did he just watch his last couple of fights and think he's already retired? I mean, he just
probably
walked right at him and ate that shot.
You really see me do it. Dalloway's like a pretty mediocre fighter, right? Like I don't know.
Is his name like Clarence Barron or something like that? That's a pretty epic name, but
yeah,
I don't know, man.
I think he's kind of more caught. The Oliveira Jury fight, for Jury, like I said, I'm kind of surprised on your side. He's kind of known having his grappling and stuff to get submitted. We know, obviously, Oliveira could submit anymore. We know the difference in the level, but I didn't think it'd be first round at all. It's tough for Jury because he kind of had his rise. He was in talks for title to take that Cerrone fight, and then he kind of Takes 2 tough losses here.
That's how it happens with Oliveira, though. He's kind of quick, and he's got like some explosiveness when it comes to those submissions. So I think some people don't expect it so early in the first round. You know, they think like, oh, hey, like I'm Miles Jury. You know, I should come in. This is just an example, Miles. I should come in there and, you know, it should be all right early out in the fight. You know, I got a good gas tank going. I'm bigger than this guy. Oliveira used to be a lightweight too, and like he used to roll with lightweights and everything. Like he knows what's going on there, and he just moves and gets you. So.
All right, let's get to the main card. 4 fights were featured for UFC Orlando. The first fight in the women's strawweight division is UFC newcomer Carolina Kowalkiewicz. I believe that's how they were pronouncing it. I think I got it. Did I get it right?
I think that's right, yeah.
Okay. Pretty close. I feel ashamed that I can't get it right because I am Polish, so I should like nail it without even looking. But in this fight, 2 things I noticed. One, Randa did not go to her wrestling as early as I thought she was going to. And 2, her conditioning was not that great. I think her conditioning kind of failed her heading into the 3rd round. And Carolina, who I think we all expect to have the better stand-up in this fight, really showcased it in the 3rd round with the Marcos that was wearing down as she outstruck Marcos 56-18. And I think with piecing her up on the feet and also losing some steam, she was 0 for 5 on her takedown attempts. And to me, Carolina really cemented that round. The first round was really close, but I think I would have gave it to Marco. She was pushing forward. She didn't land a takedown in that round, but she was pushing forward, being aggressive. I think caught Carolina maybe a little off guard a little bit. And Marcos did outstrike her in that first frame 28-26. And then, like I said, round 2, Winter wrestling a little more, 3 takedown attempts in that round, did land one, but I think Carolina was starting to figure out what Marcos was doing at that point, was doing a good job of keeping her off of her, and did outstrike her 22-10. And then, like I said, in the 3rd round. So to me, I thought Carolina was going to get it. The only thing was that 2nd round, you can make a case that Marcos with the takedown and the takedown attempts may have got it, but the judges all saw it the way of the fighter from Poland, 29-28 on 2 cards, and surprisingly a 30-27 was thrown on there, which I thought was surprising. But Kowalkiewicz gets the somewhat of an upset over the top 10 ranked Randa Marcos. And for Marcos, moving from right here in Metro Detroit up to Montreal at TriStar, I did see some improvements, but like I said, she didn't go to her wrestling soon enough for me, and her conditioning failed her there in the 3rd round were the biggest takeaways I took from Marcos.
Yeah, I feel like, a couple of things to take away from that fight was that I feel like Ronda's transition to a new camp might have just shown right there. I mean, getting situated to a new area, just a whole new almost training regimen. They're no joke up at TriStar. They take it serious up there. And so I feel like for her, there might have just been so much going on and everything with this new training camp. Not to saying that like it doctors skills. I mean, because she's shown improvement, but I feel like when you transition and you start changing things up a bit and everything, it's a weird period to talk, because she just moved up there like what, 2 months ago.
Yeah, it was right before this fight even got announced.
Yeah, so
she moved up there. She was in Windsor, coming over here to train in Metro Detroit with Darren Cruikshank and Jason Fisher and Cody Stamen at Michigan Top Team in Dearborn.
Yeah.
And then her and her husband decided to move up to Montreal. She was living up there, and I think will continue to live up there full time. So, yeah, it was a move. I wouldn't say an interesting move. I mean, it's a move you kind of go, all right, well, she's going to try something different, maybe a little bigger camp. Maybe that'll help her. She'll have a little more training partners than what Michigan Top Team will. But like I said, it's things that you thought maybe she would be ready for. Like you thought the biggest thing she can prove on is maybe strategy, because Fraza Hobby, boy,
it's a morning.
We'll come up with a good strategy for him. But like I said, she didn't push the pace with the takedowns, and that's kind of what made her successful from the start of her appearance on The Ultimate Fighter up until this fight. That's kind of what she was known for, and she didn't do that. And if you weren't gonna do that, you're taking on Kowalkiewicz, who is a champion kickboxer, and that's what she does in MMA. She's been really good at striking. I mean, she was an Invicta. I mean, there was tape on her. It's not like all her fights were in Poland and you can't find anything on her. So I'm not sure if she changed it up in the heat of the moment.
I don't know.
She got
2 month
into the cage,
camp,
but it didn't seem like the same Randa Marcos that fought Angeline Daisley or Jessica Penne.
Right. Good.
Yeah, I don't know what the game plan was, but I don't like it all. Like you're saying with strategy, usually that's where they excel there. And I was kind of disappointed in this fight because I feel like her normal style almost was the key to winning this fight. You got grappler versus striker, and I feel like maybe she overlooked it and counted, hey, you know what, maybe I can try and prove a point, and then I can go back to my grappling if worse comes to worse, but it was too late. She's kind of tired now. She's taking a couple shots, and it just didn't work out for her. But the game plan there, you had to come out aggressive with the grappling from the start. I don't really get why she was standing there, and I don't want to fully say like, oh, this is bad on not TriStar or anything, but I think it's a little too soon. I think we will see major improvements from her. She just moved over there, and I expect a lot more in the next couple fights, and she'll take more of a learning than anything.
Yeah, I think it's just a warm-up fight at her new camp. I mean, 2 months. I mean, you got to settle into your new home. You got to get ready at this gym. You're changing your lifestyle up and everything. Then you're fighting a really decent fighter. I'll cut the Ronda some slack and everything. It wasn't like she took a TKO in the first round and everything. So it could have still been an arguable win for her. So I still like her. I feel like she's one of my favorite fighters coming out of that season. I think she'll show a lot of improvement. So
Real quickly, Kowalkiewicz, Karate Hottie next.
I'll take it. I like Kowalkiewicz. Once she realized that Ronda wasn't going to be doing that takedown so much and everything, that's where you saw her starting to pour on the strikes in those later rounds and everything. Once she realized, like, okay, this is how this fight's going to go. She's a smart fighter. She's really good at just letting it all out. But Karate Hottie is a different monster than Ronda, and I feel like it's just like another test that I'd like to see Kowalkiewicz go through. So, and then win-win out of there, we both have a possible contender. So.
Next fight of the evening in the lightweight division, Michael Johnson against Nate Diaz. Now, we talked to Michael Johnson before the fight, and I asked him if leg kicks would be a big part of his strategy, and early on it was. And I think it was affecting Nate Diaz, very similar to Diaz's last fight against the champion, Rafael Dos Anjos. And Johnson was doing good. He was mixing in the leg kicks. Diaz also, I thought, was hanging back more in the first round. You can look at the numbers on Fight Metric, evident he only threw 66 strikes to Johnson's 94. I think he was trying to figure out how Johnson was coming at him, how his range was going to work. And, you know, those leg kicks didn't help, but I feel Nate was kind of feeling him out there in the first round. The second round, I feel like Nate started to figure out, you saw more output, again, as put by the strikes, as he threw 124 strikes in that second frame, which equated to outstriking Johnson in landed strikes 69-37. And I think that ability to figure things out and start pouring on the output really affected Johnson, because from the middle of that round to the end of the fight, Johnson really stopped throwing the leg kicks and got caught up in headhunting and the brawl and the Stockton slap that Nate Diaz was bringing. I think it messed with Michael Johnson's game plan. He got caught up in what Diaz was trying to do and trying to match Diaz at his own game. And that didn't work out in the third round, as he did the exact same thing. He outstruck him 67-37, almost the exact same round. And I think Johnson went in with a good strategy, but changed it. And he got away from what was working, which was using leg kicks and landing big power punches. And he got away from that and got caught up trying to reach. Diaz figured it out, used his reach well, and was just popping him in, basically at a 2-to-1 clip for 10 minutes. And if you're able to do that, you're going to get a victory. So to me, it was no doubt that he got this unanimous decision victory there, and what earned fight of the night.
Yeah, this is, first off, I'll say Diaz looks probably better than he's ever looked. I mean, he was sharp. His hands were fast. That 1-2 was landed nonstop at will. I think the first round, Johnson won this round, but this is the round Nate Diaz won the fight. He more just frustrated him anything, and that's what got him out of his game plan. Threw a couple of his slaps. He's out there talking. I think ref told him to be quiet a couple times. And, I mean, he was out there just frustrating him, and that's why. This is how Diaz wins fight. They get you in that game plan that they want, and then they just tear you apart from there. You can't keep up with their pace. I think he still has the record from a previous fight for most strike output, like all strikes. And he just lays it on you, and he lands that 1-2. He's pointing at his face. I mean, it was bad, but what happens when you fall and happen down the road?
You're just about to say that. Yeah, this is no knock on Johnson. I mean, it's a tough loss for him, especially ranking-wise. But Diaz he does this to fighters. You know, that's what the Diazes are known for, so to speak. I mean, he did it to Cerrone. I mean, Cerrone just had a title shot. So Johnson's no way out of title contention in a fight or two or anything like that. He's still a good fighter. Like most dudes, they succumb to the Diaz trash talk, and once they get in the ring, and then he just puts that output onto you and everything. It's kind of like it just keeps rolling in your head and everything and stuff. I mean, and Diaz though, his only skill, he looked really good.
Yeah,
that combo.
We got to talk about. Now, Colin, we love output because I feel that's such a key to success, and it's something that I look at. Maybe I'm too over analytical on the numbers here, but I really like looking when you see an output. I mean, both guys, again, this is a 15-minute fight, threw a combined 607 strikes in 15 minutes. That's amazing. If you can do that, even if you lose, you at least tried. You threw everything on the table. I mean, if you're averaging 100 thrown strikes around, you're not holding back. And I love that from both these guys in this fight. And that's what made it such a great fight. It's because both guys were still trying. Johnson, he was getting hit, but he was still coming because he has the power that one punch could have ended that fight, regardless of how tough Nate Diaz is. And he was still coming and still trying, just like, like we say, he got away from what made him successful in his previous fights and what made him successful in that first round.
Yeah, Diaz just found his bread and butter, and now it's just that combo. I mean, and once he just started landing it, he just used that, just coasted out beautifully.
He always is. His boxing, I don't know if people, I don't want to say underestimate, but he's longer than he looks. It's something they find that home in the distance. Like the one he was walking away, not even looking, laughing, they turns and throws it.
They move weird, which is so great. I mean, that's why I like watching them fight.
But these are both output guys. I mean, that's how Johnson's won his couple previous Edson fight and everything. So, I mean, for him, if you follow the UFC rankings, he's still above Nate Diaz somehow. I don't know how that works. But
I don't believe in any of it.
Neither of these guys, Johnson doesn't go too far back. Nate Diaz is right where he left off, and he's taking huge fights, nothing but big fights.
Co-main event of the evening in the heavyweight division as Junior Dos Santos took on Alistair Overeem. And for as hyped as I was on this fight, like the fight I was looking forward to most on this card, to me, it was rather lackluster. I think both guys were maybe worried about the power or getting hit first, or I'm not really sure what it was, but we talk about output. In the last fight, this fight nearly went just 10 minutes, and we only saw a combined strike of 99 strikes in nearly 10 minutes with two guys.
Yeah.
That's one round from one of the other guys. It just, I don't know, it just wasn't there. And then towards the end of the second round, just Overeem just caught Dos Santos with the left hook, and that was all she wrote. I mean, it was a good knockout. I'm not trying to discredit Overeem, but the way that the two gentlemen fighting for the title in the division fight, with their output being Cain Velasquez and Fabricio Verdum, both are strong guys putting out with strikes and movement and takedown attempts. Even though Overeem won, I didn't see a guy, at least based off of that performance, that is beating Cain Velasquez or Fabricio Verdum. So either guy, regardless of who came out of that, is going to have to step up their game, though, because I'm assuming Overeem will get the title shot. I find it very hard to believe that he doesn't.
Yeah, in heavyweight, I mean, it's weird. You can get just one win. You're either going on the title run, or you could take a loss, and you're just out of the count right now. In my opinion, this fight should have happened 3 years ago. It clearly showed that these were two different fighters now, obviously, from when Alistair first came over, which is what we all wanted originally when he first came over, other than Lesnar. But yeah, you could tell they're both respecting each other's power. It's a tough loss on JDS. I mean, he takes these things pretty hard, and I love the guy. But I mean, I can't knock Overeem. He was smart about it. He had a couple of fights where he got a little too confident, and he would walk out and just eat unnecessary shots and get knocked out. So I'm glad that at least he wasn't stupid. I'm just going to say it that way. He knew Overeem. Dos Santos was just cocking up that uppercut. You could see it just all the way in the back when that fight first came out. JDS had that bad boy ready to launch, and Overeem just kept his distance, and he fought smart, though. That's the thing. That's what you got to do against probably, arguably, the strongest hitter in the division. I know Roy Nelson has that overhand right, but JDS, he throws it quick.
Mm-hmm.
So hard and heavyweight, because at one point I want to look at this and say, I want to see more output. And then you look at the outcome and you see that's why they were like that. These guys, really anyone in heavyweight. It only takes one. And then two guys that are as technical in striking as JDS or Overeem, they both respect each other and they know, and that's why this fight ended as devastatingly quick as it did. Um, this fight's tough for me. Kind of like you said, but Overeem wins it, but I don't see a title contender in that win. I don't see it happening. So I think he could get overshadowed by the Stipe Miocic fight. I think
depending on how that goes.
Yeah,
I mean,
if
it
that
could.
fight has
It
a
could.
impressive win in any sort of fashion, he could get overshadowed. Because I watched this fight, I kind of felt like when I watched Bader Rashad, where I'm like, it's good, but none of these guys are close to Cormier.
And the thing that may, regardless of how good Stipe and Orlowski is, another reason why I think he'll get the push is because they've been paying Overeem a lot of money. Yeah. Now he's technically a free agent; they'd have to re-sign him for his next fight, but I'm imagining that the money doesn't get that much different if he is to re-sign with the UFC. So if the UFC wants him around, to me, you paid to bring him in originally as a title contender. You set him up, you gave him Brock Lesnar, and his next fight was supposed to be for the title. He messed that up with TRT and kind of, went, and, he's righted the ship now. Now he's on a nice streak. He actually looks like a contender. We thought he was, but I think if you're going to re-sign this guy and pay him the big money he's been getting, you got to eventually get him a shot. And no offense to Stipe and Orlowski, but they're not making the type of money that Alistair Overeem is.
Right. Well, I mean, the way I see it is Arlovsky gets a win. He's moving up for the shot. I feel like that's just what's going to happen. But Overeem versus Arlovsky or Overeem versus Verdum or Overeem versus Kane are all fights I'd want to see anyway. Regardless if he gets a shot or not, I feel like Overeem's next fight is still going to be pretty good, and it might even be worth his salt for the UFC.
I think no matter what, say Overeem gets the shot or the winner, Stipe or Orlowski, the other guy just gets the loser of that title shot. It has to be that. I mean, say Overeem doesn't get the shot, who else do you fight from here coming off knockout over Dos Santos?
Mm-hmm.
There's no one more impressive you're going to knock out. So for him, you either sit and wait, or you get the loser of that title shot, or obviously vice versa.
Or you fight Royce Gracie and Bellator.
Yeah, or you could fight that one honestly, Russian dude or whatever that one guy is.
He's a free agent. Fedor knocks out Jadip Singh. Get 2-0, go fight the door.
All right, let's get to the main event of the evening. Rafael Dos Anjos against Donald Cerrone. Maybe not surprising that Dos Anjos wins, but the fashion he wins, knocking out the Cowboy in the first round. And just originally it was the same body kick that Anthony Pettis used to knock out Donald Cerrone in the first round, and that's what started the downfall of the Cowboy. That left front kick right to the body, I guess that's the Cowboy's Achilles heel, and that got him.
He's got that weak liver.
Kind of just set him spiraling. It's probably from drinking all that Budweiser.
Exactly.
And Dos Anjos kind of poured it on. Now, towards the end, and Joe Rogan brought this onto the broadcast with Dominic Cruz, Cowboy's covering up. He's doing the holding the phone technique, and 4 or 5 punches come in. A couple were to the back of the head, and the rest of them were blocked by the glove of Cerrone. Herb Dean comes in and stops it. Now, it looked as though afterwards Cerrone said something, and that's maybe what prompted the stoppage. But just looking solely at the footage, those punches were not landing. And considering Herb Dean just 1 week ago let Chris Weidman get beat to a pulp for a minute and a half, it's a little surprising that he stopped it so quickly. Yeah. I'm not arguing that Cerrone probably wasn't going to win. I think that situation probably plays itself out the exact same if he waits 30 more seconds, but there's no debate about it. There's no question. There's no, well, he landed a couple of solid shots. Those were all blocked, and I'm not discrediting Dos Anjos or anything like that, but I would have liked to seen a few more seconds of that before I waved it off.
Yeah,
that's all I'm saying.
Well, so I feel different on it. I feel like Herb Dean knows the fighters. He's fought before, and he actually researches the guys, and I feel like he knows the difference between like Weidman and Cerrone. Weidman, he's the kind of guy who will eat your shots and then come back and beat you.
He's
kind
a
of
good
thing.
guy.
He's a good guy, but no. In a championship fight like that, where the champ is getting beat on like that, but the champ has eaten shots like that before and everything, and has come back to improve, there's always that leeway thing that refs tend to give in every fight I've noticed. So to me, that's just precedent. But with Cerrone, the thing is, Cerrone's the kind of guy who could have if he wanted to explode, roll. He's not a schlump on the ground. He would know how to move, but he completely turtled up and just ate the shots. And that's the thing is right there. It's like, hey, if I'm gonna go out, that's it. I'm done. I think he got really, really, really hurt from that shot that hit him early out and just dropped him. And I think, instead of just trying to prolong it and just try and fight from your guard or anything like that, I think he just took the shots hitting on him. I don't think it's so much as a complaint. It's just like, I don't know. I feel like Herb Dean did fine there. It's tough because we would, as fans, like more consistency on stoppages because sometimes.
Yeah, because
really
I'm just saying it was the complete opposite of what we just saw in a very similar fight.
But Cerrone, this is no knock on Cerrone, but he is the kind of guy who will eat a couple shots, and it usually just means he's done. If Cerrone's eating shots and he's not answering you back, generally he's done if he's on the ground like that. Because we've seen Cerrone fight where he doesn't just take, a whooping like that without answering. But Weidman, he would, and he would attempt to come back. But I don't know. I'm an amateur. I don't know anything. So
I just, if I remember, it's actually been a while now since I watched this. I have to watch it back. I didn't like the timing of it because I felt like when it did get stopped, he was sort of standing up and blocking at the same time. And I felt like that was the time where I've been like, oh, all right, he might be good in this situation. I would almost rather he stopped it earlier when he first dropped them and landed the first couple shots. I have to watch it back, but I felt like he was standing up.
Yeah, the shots were getting blocked. And also, the reason I would like to see him go, because, again, this was the first round. Cerrone wasn't going to be – it was going to be as fresh as he could be in that first round. So that's another reason, too. This wasn't in the fifth round where Cerrone had taken shots and was getting dominated, and then, that situation happened. It's like, all right, you can wave it off. This was the first round.
But you could say that about RDA, where he has all his energy in and he's winging monsters at you. So
if you think about it, this is the first round, and Cerrone, we know, is a slow starter. If you think about their first fight, Cerrone won that third round. The longer this fight goes, the more edges towards him. I think it's tough. I don't know.
Well, that's the call he made, so that's the call we get.
It happens. I like Cerrone.
Dos Anjos gets the victory. Maybe it's Connor. Maybe it's Tony Ferguson.
He's got a fight coming out in 2 days.
Somehow Habib shouldn't even be in the discussion. I don't care if he beat Dos Anjos. That was years ago, and he's been hurt. I don't think you luck your way into a title shot. Not in a division where you have contenders.
Give him Nate Diaz.
Like, he needs at least 2 wins before he gets a title shot in my eyes. You don't sit out for 2-3 years. Even then, I don't even know if he still like he had how many top 10 wins did he have then?
One, the RDA. That's it.
Yeah,
that's the only good guy he's beat. Everyone else is below average talent.
Watch then and watch now. RDA is not the same fighter at all. It's completely different. And I just Khabib, I don't want to hear the discussion. He needs 2 wins back.
He needs to prove that he can't get hurt in a fight camp.
Yeah.
All right, let's get to UFC 195 pay-per-view, Las Vegas, Nevada, MGM. New Year's Eve card here for the UFC. Some notable names, of course, we had Joe Duffy here on the show. He's taking on Dustin Poirier on the undercard. Also, Sheldon Westcott will be taking on Edgar Garcia. Joe Shoto's on the card. The Hot Sauce, Scott Holtzman, taking on Drew Dober. And then, unfortunately, Kyle Noak was supposed to take on Kelvin Gastelum. Gastelum got hurt, so he's taking on newcomer Alex Morono as well. And then the return of Michael Donald, a former title challenger at 135, 2 years of injuries. And Michael McDonald's finally back in the UFC. He's taking on Masanori Kanehara in the bantamweight division. Let's get to the main card here. Gleason Tebow and Tony Sims will kick things off in the lightweight division. Trujillo on tough time as of late, losing his last 2 fights, getting submitted in both of them. But I don't see that happening as he's taking on Tony Sims, who, much like him, is a headhunter. Sims comes into this fight with a UFC record of 1-1 overall in his career, 12-3 with 10 knockouts in 12 victories, which is actually more than Trujillo, surprisingly, as Trujillo only has 5 knockouts and 12 victories. I think this is just going to be a straight-up brawl, and it's just going to be who's going to be able to take the punches and last longer. And both have proved that they're not great grapplers and they can lose to grapplers. So luckily they're not taking on one in this matchup. And I think this is a perfect fight to kick off the card. I think we're going to see some fireworks and most likely a knockout. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's a first round knockout. It's just who's going to be able to stay standing longer.
Yeah, I like this fight. I mean, it'll be a lot of fun. It's just really what the gist of the fight's going to be. I don't have any thought of which way they might even go, just because these two just like the brawl, and it's just really who's going to be at the punch first. So
Yeah, if I had to edge it one way, it's hard technically because both these guys are going to kind of go for the fences here. But I think Trujillo is more tried and true against tougher competition. I mean, I know he's come off a couple of tough losses, but look at the guys he's fought. Not to knock, I mean, guys like, what is that, Olivier Mercier, that's tough for Sims, but I think Trujillo's just been here a little more. He's been against the bigger names in the spotlight on most of the card. I don't want to complain more about the card, but I would rather the Duffy and Poirier fight be in this spot, but it's still a great fight. If you want to just draw people into the exciting fight, start the card off.
Next fight of the evening, featherweight division, Brian Ortega against Diego Brandao. Ortega won his last fight, which was, we mentioned, almost our fight of the year in his fight against Thiago Tavares, which is officially his first win in the UFC after having a no contest in his first UFC bout in July of last year. And that fight against Tavares, he showed a lot to me. He got the finish officially by knockout, the first knockout win of his career, surprisingly enough. But he is a guy that has a lot of great submission skills, is not afraid to be on his back, and is constantly doing something to you. This guy does not waste a minute of time. If he's standing up, he's coming forward. If he's on your back, he's hitting you or trying with submissions. And if he's on top of you, he can rain down nasty elbows. So this is a guy that I think is a very game opponent and has a big test in his maturation as he takes on Diego Brandao, who legitimately has one-shot knockout power, some of the best power in this division. But as much as he likes to dish it out, he can also get hit too. If you just look at his last 4 fights and take a snapshot of that, 2 first-round knockout losses and 2 first-round knockout wins in his last 4 fights. So this is going to be a big test for Ortega. If Ortega can get this thing into the second round, I think he has a very real chance to win because his grappling skills, I feel, are far superior to Brandao. But if he gets caught early, it's going to be a short night and another knockout bonus for Diego Brandao.
yeah, there's a lot of pressure going into this fight. I think more for Ortega. He's got that O on that record that, you know, he's 9-0. I mean, he could lose that, and it's when you're that young in your career, losing your O can sometimes hit you pretty hard. And Brandao, on the other hand, he's 20-10. He's got a lot of experience. He's been in there. He's taken the losses. He's taken lots of wins. So he's not afraid to just come out there and bang. But it comes down to pressure. Ortega is definitely not a slow starter, and he likes to come out and hit. And the thing is, they're both black belts. And as much as I feel like this is an even match, you know, Brandao has shown that he likes to stand and bang more than he likes to go to the ground. You know, Ortega might see that chance and try pounding on him a bit and then, you know, subbing him. So, but who knows? At the same time, Brandao is just as lethal, and he comes out of nowhere and will just hit you with that left or right, and then you got a problem.
I think this fight we're going to see almost similar to the first fight of this card, Tony Sims. I mean, I think we're going to end up seeing a Diego Brandao fight, and the problem with that is, like you said, it's a coin flip. He swings wild. If Ortega can keep him straight, maybe even tag him a little bit, get it to the ground, there's a lot of stuff Brandao has to worry about. But then with Ortega, I mean, has he ever fought someone that can knock you out like Brandao? Brandao might be one of the heaviest hitters down there, and I mean, this fight's tough for him because as much as he's on 2 wins, I feel like he's still sort of facing that end where he wins some, wins some. He's not really stringing together a title threat anymore, so this one could go either way.
Next fight of the evening in the welterweight division as Albert Tumanov takes on Lorenz Larkin. Tumanov was the underdog in his last fight, and he was able to knock out kind of the hometown guy there, so to speak, in Alan Joboy in the first round to run his winning streak to 4 straight, including 3 knockout finishes. The only non-finish was against Nicholas Muskie on the card there in Sweden, and hasn't lost since his debut in the organization, which was to Aldemar Alcantara back in February of last year. Since then, he's been nothing short of excellent, and he's really been able to figure things out in the UFC. But I think he's taking on his toughest test to date in the former Strikeforce fighter, originally at light heavyweight, now at welterweight, Lorenz Larkin. And since dropping down, he has looked pretty good, knocking out John Howard and Santiago Ponzinibbio in back-to-back performances this year. definitely on a roll. It was a great move for his career, moving from 185 to welterweight. And for Tumenov, he's going to have to worry about the power, the size, and the pace of Lorenz Larkin, which are all very hard things to work at. And even though Tumenov, I think, much like every guy they get out of Russia, probably has a sambo background, probably the better grappler. But I just think the size of Larkin, even though they're the same height, 5'11", the fact that Larkin had good takedown defense when he fought dudes at 205 pounds. Let's not mistake. He fought King Mo in Strikeforce. This is a guy that is used to taking on big guys. So I feel like he's going to be ready for Tumenov. Tumenov's not going to do anything that really is going to surprise Larkin. And for me, it's for Tumenov, I would try to throw in some leg kicks, try to be unpredictable, and got to have output. Because I think if you're going to sit back against Lorenz Larkin, I just don't think you're going to win. I don't think you can win trying to outpoint Lorenz Larkin. I don't think you can do that. So I think for Tumenov, he has his work cut out for him. He could win, but he's going to have to be on his A game, because Lorenz Larkin is a guy that I think can make a run for a title in this division.
Yeah, 100%. Ever since Larkin's went to welterweight, he's been a different animal. But the thing with Tumenov that woke me up was the Jabouin fight, because I really liked Jabouin. I thought he was going to go through him. Man, he knocked him out pretty bad. But the question mark here is, I want to say more cut. I think if Tumenov gets it done, he has to do it in the first. We see him. You get one decision against Alcantara. He loses. He won the other one. I think it was close. I don't remember the fight as much as I'd like to. But Larkin, like you said, the pace that he's been putting on at welterweight is crazy. He's going to put output, pace, everything on you. So when he gets into the second and third round, it's going to be tough for Tumenov. So I think if he wants to get it done, he has to get it done early.
Yeah, this is it's definitely gonna be interesting to see how this turns out, because Larkin, he has definitely a different style of pace that I think Tumenov hasn't really fought. Larkin likes to come at you weird angles, and then he'll catch you when you're not expecting it. And he's a big, explosive guy, and it's really fun to watch. And Tumenov, I mean, when you saw him fight Jabouin, he looked impeccable against him. He was just in and out and just, snapping kicks here and there, and eventually he just took him out. So it'll be a different test for Tumenov, but being said, Tumenov's he's got such a wide variety in how he throws his strikes and everything. It's going to be tough for Larkin, because he's really got to be thinking, where's this going to come next? Is he going to, try and stick me with a combo? Is he going to try and counter me? Is he going to try and hit me in the head with the kick or the leg or the body? And we'll see. I think we might see a bit more of Larkin trying to push forward and Tumenov fight on the back pedal, but I still think he'll be able to stick a punch in there, stick a kick in there, and kind of actually surprise Larkin. But Larkin has puncher's chance always, and he's got crazy power. So
let's get to the co-main event of the evening. Stipe Miocic against the former heavyweight champion of the world and Andrei Arlovski. This should be a great fight. Both guys are tremendous boxers, maybe a little more edge to Arlovski in that area, but of course Stipe should have the better conditioning in this fight. And he was joking about that he should have the better conditioning in the interview, but I think it's apparent that if this thing goes into the late in the second into the third, that the man from Cleveland, Ohio should have the better conditioning in this fight. And also the X factor, I think people forget, because a lot of his fights, really with the exception of the Mark Hunt fight, he has really shown stand-up skills. That's primarily what he's done. But this guy was a pretty accomplished wrestler at Cleveland State, and he definitely put that on display, in his domination of Mark Hunt for nearly 25 minutes. And while Arlovski does have good takedown defense, and he's notorious for having that in his career, if Stipe gets this thing on the ground, Arlovski's not really a guy that has much off his back, and I don't see him doing much to defend when he does get on his back. So I think that's an X factor, that if in a scramble or something, if Stipe gets on top, that's a huge advantage, I think, for Stipe. But if it stays standing, I would say Arlovski has a little more power in his shots. And also, as noted by his last two fights, he's starting to throw more kicks and more attacks with knees as well. So he's not just simply punches. He's starting to evolve a little bit at 36 now training at Jackson's out there in Albuquerque. So if it stays standing, it's a really even fight. I really do think that it's a very close fight. But if Stipe can get this thing to the ground and get on top, Arlovski's definitely going to be in some trouble.
Yeah, I think mostly what we're going to see here is Stipe, he sees the success with his wrestling in that Mark Hart fight. And I think on the stand-up, Arlovski is I don't want to say a lot more dangerous, but I think people really, this dude is dangerous. His hand speed for heavyweight, he lets some shots fly. I mean, we've seen a lot in the Brown fight. He was landing the tattoo punches, the backhands, and everything there was. I mean, his boxing's still crisp at 36. So I think we're going to see Stipe look for a lot of just, even if he doesn't wrestle, keep him against the cage, really wear him out and look for it to win off his conditioning. It's going to be tough. Like you said, once you get Arlovski down, he doesn't have much to offer, but he is tough to take down. He's not no slouch to take down. And, man, I'm really excited for this fight. I know I was really on the Arlovski bandwagon with him coming back, and then the Frank Mir fight kind of killed it for a lot of us. But I think this fight will completely bring it back, because the winner of this fight we kind of touched on earlier, you can make a case for a title shot. You just have to be impressive, and you have to get it done. So we'll see where this fight goes.
Yeah, I think the big changing factor here in this one, it's just going to be how well Jackson Wink develops a strategy for Arlovski. Stipe is no joke. His 2 losses say that he's really good at just putting pressure at anywhere he wants in the game. So if he wants to stand with you and, start feinting and then counter, and when you decide to throw something big, I mean, he'll put you in the pocket and tee off on you, back up, and then wait. If he wants to pull you to the ground, just start winning by points and landing on you. I mean, Stipe's got answers everywhere. Arlovski, his biggest answer lies in just where he's going to punch you from. Being said, Jackson Winklejohn aren't stupid. They're good at making those things to their advantage, especially if they have like a quote unquote one-dimensional fighter. Not really, but So we'll see how that turns out. I mean, Arlovski might come out with a good strategy, and he might do well. I mean, he didn't get subbed or taken out by Frank Mir, and that's what could have happened. And Frank Mir's like no joke when it comes to jiu-jitsu at heavyweight, And honestly, if Arlovski would have came flying forward at Frank Mir, you probably would have seen Mir try and throw him down on his back and get it. It didn't happen, probably because some game planning, but you saw how entertaining the fight was. So if we see that kind of Arlovski, we probably won't be seeing a title shot for either of these guys.
Let's get to the main event of the evening for the welterweight title. Robbie Lawler against Carlos Condit. Looking at Carlos Condit, the former UFC interim welterweight champion, as well as former WEC welterweight champion. He is 7-4 in the UFC, most recently coming off a win over Thiago Alves back in May, which was a second-round knockout. Of his 30 victories, 28 finishes for the man out of Albuquerque, New Mexico, with 15 knockouts and 13 submissions. He's taking on Robbie Lawler, who also has a lot of finishes in his career. 20 knockouts out of 26 victories for ruthless Robbie Lawler, riding a 4-fight winning streak, seeing 2 of those come by way of knockout, including his last fight to defend his title successfully for the first time against Rory McDonald, beating the man from Canada for a second time. And the difference I see in this fight is, while Robbie Lawler is very dangerous and has a lot of finishing skills, it's primarily with his punches. Now, he's mixed in a lot of kicks since coming back into the UFC, but it's not nearly as the level of some other guys, but it's still primary with great boxing, heart, and grit for Robbie Lawler. The ability to take a punch and throw one is what made him successful, and that's one of the reasons why he's the champion. And looking at Condit, the reason I say there's a difference is Condit gets finishes, as noted, 28 of 30. That's one of the highest finishing rates of anyone in any division in the UFC. But he can do it a multitude of areas. It's not simply with knockouts, and it's not simply with submissions. The reason he's known as the natural born killer is because he can beat you anywhere. Anywhere the fight goes, he has the ability to finish you. And he also has a great ability to take a punch as well. And I think that, to me, is a big X factor in this fight, is that when it stays standing, Condit's a little longer, a little rangier, might use kicks a little better, probably has a little better footwork and head movement, maybe a little better conditioning. But obviously, Lawler can just keep on coming forward and still land something. But if it gets to the ground, it gets to the scramble, or if Lawler feels like the pressure and the output from the variety of strike Conda's throws, and Lawler goes maybe into wrestling mode to try to take him out, you're not taking Condon out of his element. He still has the ability to finish you. And I think that to me is a huge X factor in this fight. Is Robbie Lawler's dangerous on his feet, but Condis is dangerous everywhere. And that could end up being why Carlos Condit becomes the welterweight champion.
Yeah, between the few guys in welterweight that I really pegged for to be future champ after GSP, it was probably Condit, Diaz, or McDonald. And then Lawler came in and really surprised me with how impressive he's really gotten over the past few years. And so I'm like, all right, we'll go with Robbie Lawler. We'll see how this turns out. And then he's just come out just banging guys around. And it's tough because, with going back to Jackson Winkeljohn, they're really, really good at game plans. And when you got a guy like Carlos Condit where he's good everywhere, you have a lot to work with. When you say, like, hey, this is what you're going to go out there and do, it's like, these are your options. It's not like Arlovsky where it's like, okay, get the takedown, try and sweep, get the back, choke him out. Condit, it's just like, hey, you could do anything. This is what we're going to tailor for you because this is how Robbie Lawler fights. He's good at stuffing the takedown. He's good at keeping the fight standing, and he's got some tremendous power. This is where we're going to work here and everything. We're going to keep you in and out. We're going to keep you moving. Fight, kind of like how the Diaz fight went and everything, where he moved a lot. And that's what I think he needs to do because with Lawler, you can't stand and bang. He beat Rory McDonald into submission. McDonald tapped while standing. All right. That's how his last fight went. And you're only as good as your last fight. And Robbie Lawler probably arguably beat one of the baddest welterweights out there right now, who went around in the top 10 tearing apart dudes. And then Lawler just beat him bloody raw. So that's a really tough fight, and that's a huge puzzle for Condit and his team to really decide how they're going to take it and everything. You could come at him straight up and everything and just try banging with them. Condit has a really diverse striking. I mean, he gets his leg up there. Lawler, you don't fear the head kick as much or anything like that. Condit can land that sucker with power. But, we'll see. It'll come to pace in the first round, I think.
The thing is, I want to say too, Lawler, people talk about he's mostly hands, but that left head kick he has is nasty. The one he lands on Volker, he throw it a couple times, it is nasty. So you do got to look out for that. But it's kind of like you said, where Connor's just dangerous everywhere. But I don't think we'll see this fight go to the ground. Even if Lawler shoots for a takedown, I think he's already in trouble at that point, and then we'll definitely see Condit shine on the ground and get his submission. So I think if we see a takedown, Lawler's for sure in trouble. I think this fight will play out mostly on the feet. I want to see Condit get a little more gritty. I mean, he came out there, he did a little bit in the GSP fight, but that was because he got beat up on the ground a lot. But he definitely has a chin. We seen in the fight where he hurt his knee, he ate some huge shots from Tyron Woodley. But yeah, it just comes down on the striking. I think he's way more diverse and he's way smarter. Rory, he kind of went in there and he got into that war mode where he was liking the war a little bit, and he was winning on the scorecards. That's one thing I'll get to a point on Robbie. The heart and grit that you say, it's so important. He was losing that fight on the scorecards. If he didn't go out there and get it done, he wouldn't be the champ right now.
And yeah, that's what I mean. This is a guy that you can't keep around. You have to put him away. You can't give this guy opportunities to come back in his fight, and that's kind of what happened against Rory McDonald. Rory McDonald couldn't put him away, gave him a chance to come back, and he got knocked out. And Condit, no offense to Rory, but Condit doesn't do that. I mean, if you finish 28 guys in 30 fights, you're putting guys away. You're not giving them a second chance to come back. So I feel like if Condit gets the opportunity to finish this fight, he will finish it. And if he doesn't, I would find it very hard to believe. That's what I'll put it, because he's proven that if you don't put him away, he's going to knock you out. I mean, look at the list of guys Robbie's done. You can make a list of guys he's done that to. I mean, I think the biggest example, I know this is going back to Strikeforce in a different weight class, but ask Melvin Manhoef, about coming close to beating Robbie Lawler. There's a lot of guys here in this list that have come close to knocking out Robbie Lawler, but didn't, and they got finished.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. I think that's the biggest problem for Condit. I think he has every tool in the book to finish Lawler, but can you do it? Because I want to say he's probably the most, I don't know what the word would be, finishing success to come at Lawler, but Lawler's a different animal. We've seen him time and time. He gets rocked. He's been rocked in the Hendricks fight. He's been rocked in the Rory fight. He just keeps coming. So you have to put him out. You definitely have the opportunities, and he'll be there, but can you do it?
And I mean, going off of that though about Robbie getting rocked, I mean that's another factor you got to play in. Is like those times where he's gotten rocked in fights, he fought guys who gave him a break. McDonald still gave him a chance to kind of recover. Hendricks definitely gave him time to recover after rocking him. The thing about Condit is if he rocks you, he's going to tear off his own arm if he has to beat you. I mean, and we've seen Robbie get rocked where it looked dangerous. Like, oh man, he might be out on his feet. And he's come back because he had a chance to get his composure, lean on the fence, and start banging away from the pocket. Condit's the kind of guy where he'll come in, he'll hit you, and then he sees you wobble. He's going to throw that flying knee. He's going to try and grab your arm. He's going to try and pull you to the mat and just start hitting you with something or whatever. So I feel like that pace is going to be something Robbie's going to have to be prepared for, because if he slips left and the right comes anyway and he eats that shot, he's got to be ready to defend himself if he gets rocked. So
with that said, let's get to picks. UFC 195, first fight of the evening, lightweight division, Trujillo against Sims. I'm going to go with Tony Sims in this one. I think that he's a little more of a diverse striker, has just as much power as Trujillo, and I think Sims, though losing his last fight as well, took that fight on short notice. It was a tough fight, so I like Tony Sims in this one.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. This one I really don't know. I think Trujillo's he's on a little slump on his way down, but I think Trujillo's more tested and he's been there, so I'm gonna go with Abel Trujillo for this fight.
yeah, this is a tough one because we got a guy's octagon debut versus a guy who is down on a downturn. But I think I'm also going to go with Sims. I feel like he'll seize the moment and really put the heat on.
Featherweight division, Brian Ortega against Diego Brandao. Brandao has a chance to win, but maybe another upset I'm picking here. I'm going to go with the young kid Ortega. I just think that was maybe one of the best performances I've ever seen in his last fight, a fight that many have picked as fight of the year. So I'm going to take the man known as T-City, Brian Ortega.
Yeah, this one, man, a lot of this card is tough. I also like Ortega in this one. I think he'll get past that first round, and after that, we see Brandao fade and him really take over this fight.
I might have to go with Brandao in this one. I think he just might take the experience route. I mean, that's a really tough fight up in competition. I feel like the pressure is going to be on Ortega. Same thing with Sims, which I got wrong in the last one. Not that it was Sims' first fight. His first pay-per-view for, Ortega and Sims now. They both have the pressure of being, millions of watchers now buying to watch you fight. That's a tough thing to come in. And right now, Brandao, he has the advantage there, I think. So I'm going with Brandao.
Welterweight division, Lorenz Larkin against Tumanov. I think Tumanov can win this fight, but I really like Lorenz Larkin, and I also like the fact that he's taken on bigger guys in his career before. So even though there are only 2 fights difference in terms of their total fights, 16-2 for Tumanov, 16-4, I feel like the guys that Larkin has fought in his career, he's a lot more experienced. And I think that will help in this matchup when 2 guys are very closely matched skill-wise. So I'm going to take the Monsoon, Lorenz Larkin, in this one.
I'm going to switch it up. I don't know if it's too much of an upset, but I'm going to take Tumanov, man. He knocked out Jabouin. It really surprised me. We've seen Larkin take tough losses before, even though I think he looked really good at welterweight. I think Tumanov really has something here, and you might catch him with something early.
I'm going to go with Tumanov also. I feel like all the Russians that are coming over to the UFC right now that have been impressive, it's just because they're really hard puzzles for fighters. And I feel like Larkin's just not the kind of guy who could solve that puzzle.
Stipe Miocic against Andrei Arlovski, co-main event of the evening. This is a very tough matchup to pick, but I'm not saying this just because we had him on the show. But I'm going to go with Stipe Miocic. I think his wrestling, is a big X factor in this fight, and also his conditioning, I think, is also an X factor because Arlovski did not show that in his last fight. So I think if this thing can go past the first round, and Arlovski hasn't knocked out Stipe, if he's still there, I think that's going to be a huge sign in this fight. So give me Stipe Miocic to win this one.
Man, this one it's really tough, especially in heavyweight. Both these guys can put each other to sleep. I like Andre Arlovski. I think the train is there. His boxing's there. He's going to catch Stipe, and he's going to get that title shot. I might just be talking with my heart here, but it's going to happen. I have big dreams.
I'm also going to go with Arlovski, but I don't think he's going to get the title shot after this. I think he's going to fight the same way he fought Mir, and I feel like just through business-wise over, he's going to get that shot over him.
See, I think back into a breakdown, but if he fights like he does with Mir, he's going to lose this fight. He has to come out and take out Stipe early.
Main event of the evening, Robbie Lawler against Carlos Condit for the welterweight title. I think this is just going to be a fantastic fight of both dudes that know how to go in there and get the job done and don't allow the judges into the equation. But I think the ability to finish anywhere and the diversity of striking is what allows me to pick Carlos Condit in this fight. And that's no discredit to the champion, who has a very real shot at winning. But Condit is just one of those guys where I feel like you can't bring in somebody to prepare you for him. I feel like there's no other guy to like, oh, let's get a guy to mirror Carlos Condit. I feel like that guy doesn't exist. I feel like Robbie Lawler is a little easier to game plan for. And like I said, it's not to say that he can't win this fight because his power is tremendous, but Carlos Condit is a matchup nightmare. And I think that he'll be one of the other former WEC champions to finally get the UFC gold now.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think Condit really takes over this fight. And I mean, the real key that made me see is we've seen Lawler get hit. We've seen Lawler get rocked. He's kind of had that breather. Colin kind of touched on it. I don't think Condit will let it happen. He's too dangerous everywhere, and I think Condit will take him out in this fight.
Yeah, I got to go with MBK, man. He's a different type of fighter. You know, he's a new breed. And, you know, Robbie Lawler comes from the old age, you know, these old fighters and everything. And the thing is, like, Condit kind of came on the cusp of WEC and stuff, you know, bringing over the championship. And I got to go with him. I feel like he just puts the pace on better.
Well, that does it for this week's show. We want to thank our friends at MMASignaturesUSA.com, MMAFreak.com, MMAinsider.net, and MMAforlife.ca. And, of course, the great folks there at TopRatedMMA.com as well. He is Colin Camper. He's Billy Brand. You can follow him on Twitter at WBrand21. I am your host, Jim Gramm. You can follow me on Twitter at Jim Gramm. For more Beyond the Cage, please like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Beyond the Cage podcast. And of course, you're watching on YouTube. So if you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel, youtube.com/Beyond the Cage podcast. So for Colin and Billy, I am Jim Gramm, and thank you for listening to another edition of Beyond the Cage.